Hello, this is Susan Eche with Leaders World Institute, and we're bringing you the Leaders World. We had some technical hitches, but guess what? We are here. Again, I'm going to be introducing Dr. Beth Ackerman, and her passion for children with disabilities is uncommon. In everything she does, you can sense it, you can feel it. After attending private Christian schools for a long time, she was able to get her first job working with children with disabilities at the Rivermont schools. And during that time, she was able also to assist in starting the special education program at Liberty University. And I am a bona fide beneficiary of that program because my master's in teaching. I specialized in special ed, and yes, that's where I met Dr. Beth for the first time. She's currently the senior vice president for overseeing 15 schools at the Rivermont Schools area in across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Her master's, you should have guessed, is in special education, and she has a doctorate in educational leadership, and she travels across the world to teach on differentiated instruction, leadership, and behavioral challenges, and helping Christian educators to be able to engage with diverse populations to bring honor to God. And with us today is Dr. Beth Ackerman. You're welcome, Doctor.
Hi there. Thank you for having me, Susan. It's an
Oh,
honor.
definitely. We are so excited to have you, and I'm so excited with the conversation we are going to be having on principle centered leadership. But before we go on to have this conversation, we have our other guest. I'm telling you, we have two powerhouses with us here today. So we have Kate Onokumaya with us, and she is the lead coach at Exponential Growth Limited, which is a coaching and leadership development training organization based in Nigeria. She is an executive program leader and President's Advisory Council member with the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team. She is the co-founder of the Blooming Ladies Cooperative in Canada. And she is bilingual, and using this bilingualism, she is able to work with leaders across West and Central Africa and Europe, and she's delivering coaching and management training, and she's a keynote speaker. She's certified a certified strengths coach as well, and people equity guide, a certified personality consultant, and a global priority transformation specialist. All right. She is able to also do virtual professional speaking and presentations to people, leaders across the world. She has shared the stage with the one and only John C. Maxwell as she introduced him to an audience of over 3,000 coaches, speakers, and trainers. She has served on transformational leadership missions to Paraguay and Costa Rica alongside the Maxwell Leadership Foundation. She is author of The Growing Life, born and raised in Cameroon. She is married to her beloved husband, Rotimi, and they are blessed with two boys and a daughter. And she loves watching animation movies with her kids. I guess that's something we have in common. You're welcome, Coach Kate, to the Leaders World.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me.
So we are just going to delve into this whole conversation. Principle centered leadership. What's your take on this, Coach Kate?
Right. Thank you, Susan. Principle centered leadership. And, principles is something that I used to confuse with values. And we kind of use it interchangeably. It's either we say principles or we say values. But um, a few months ago, I was reading this book by Stephen Covey, and he gave another definition of principles that kind of sits with me. He said it's like a true north. Principles is external, while values are external. So principles they do not change. They remain fixed. They are objective, but values can be subjective. So principle-centered leadership is leadership that is based on some rock solid um, foundation, things that cannot change, like a guided form of leadership.
Wow. It's a guided form of leadership. Dr. Beth, what is your take on this whole principle leadership, principle centered leadership thing?
Yes, no, honestly, part of me is just humbled to even talk about it because I think when you're asked to talk about something like this, there's this idea that I have it right, but I think it's something I've learned through trial and error, and piggybacking on a little bit of what Kate said, values are often those they almost feel like feeling words, where the principles are the action behind those words.
Hmm.
You could have integrity, and like Kate said, everybody would describe that differently, but accountability is a way that organizations could put integrity into practice and into action by having accountability.
Mhm.
So I think principle centered leadership is just um, where you should drive organizations to take their values and what they believe in and put it into action.
I was listening to someone who said that everybody has values. Everybody has values, but what are your values, and what are those values doing to you and the people around you? I was like,
Mhm.
okay. Kate, did you want to speak on that? Coach Kate, did you want to speak on the fact that everybody has values, but what are those values and how are they
Okay.
benefiting us and the people around us and the teams that we are leading?
Mm. Okay. Can you hear me, Susan?
Yes,
Beth?
yes.
Okay. I got cut off, so I didn't hear the entire thing you said.
I would take it all over again. Oh, I said someone said that everybody has values. That we talk about values, 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 but everybody truly has values. But the question is, what values do you live by, and how are those values benefiting you, and how are they benefiting the people that you lead and the people that you serve? I was like, this is an interesting perspective, and I was wondering what your take on that was.
Susan, she's joining us from Nigeria, correct?
Yeah, she
That's pretty
is. She
amazing.
is.
I
She
guess that
is.
explains why we have some
I
technical issues.
know. We are hoping
Uh,
she's able to bounce back and speak on that as well. But I was wondering, Dr. Beth, what do you think?
Yeah, I think your values are what drives you with the people around you, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's an organization that you're leading or taking part in, and that are you trustworthy, right? Like, so trustworthiness is a big part of who we are, and they look to us and our values of things like integrity, faithfulness, um, our love and care for our students, right, or for the people we work with. And I think, that's where I say a lot of those are those feeling type words, love and care. But for people to want to follow a leader, they want you to be primarily trustworthy. And I think, and same with my children and my husband and my friends. I mean, am I trustworthy in my interactions with them?
So, what while we're having this conversation, I'm thinking in my brain right now. I'm thinking, is it possible to have different sets of values at the workplace and different sets of values in the family? Is there any possibility for that?
No, I don't. I don't see how you personally can. I'd be curious to hear someone else describe that they could, but I mean, there might be a case for that. But for me, um, you know, who you are at work should be who you are at home. I think sometimes we might present them differently, right? So how I might be transparent, for example, with my people I work with may look different than how I might want to be transparent with my children.
Hmm.
But transparency is still important as a value or as a principle. that being open with who I am as a person, but how open do you want to be with, say, your children, right?
Mm, mm.
So I do think there are differences while the value might remain the same, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. It's just how we choose to use them, and depending on the environment we find ourselves in. But at the bottom line, they are the same values that everybody needs
Right.
in every interaction, in every relationship. It just depends on what extent we are able to use them for the benefit of the cause that we are working for. If I heard you well.
Yes, it's perfect.
And Kate is back with us. And I was wondering, Kate, how do you think organizations can build sustainable teams based on principle centered leadership? All right.
Okay, I was muted. Okay,
Okay.
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Apologies. Yeah, yeah. I was following on Facebook, but somehow my laptop refused to connect. So okay, so how can organizations build teams based on principle-centered leadership? That what you said?
Yes, yes. How can organizations
Um,
build sustainable teams based on
right.
principle-based leadership, principle-centered
Yeah.
leadership? Mhm.
Thank you. So I love sustainable because sustainable means it's something that would last,
Yes.
and teamwork, teams that would last, that will stand the test of time. And when it's based on principles instead of values, then those teams can stand. And the best way I think organizations can build sustainable teams is to get buy-in, the buy-in from everybody, that look, these are principles, and our principles, they remain the same. I love what Beth said about accountability. Accountability is accountability. So if we want to build based on solid principles, yeah, those principles can stand of time, but we need to get the buy-in from everyone, and there needs to be alignment. Organizations have their values, but when we take those values and you know make them action based, and that's when we align with principles. I think it's only values become action oriented when they are aligned with principles, when they match the principles we stand for. So when our teams get buy-in, when organizational leaders can get the buy-in of their people, and they can align their values with some rock solid principles and make them action based, then I think those teams can become really great, and the organization will be a great place to work into.
Wow. While you were saying that, I was thinking about policies that drive corporations, and I'm thinking, is it possible that Dr. Beth, is it possible that policy-driven cultures could be at odds with principle-centered leadership cultures? Is it possible that these two types of situations could be at odds with one another? One is principle-centered, a principle-centered culture, and the other one is maybe policy-driven or rules-driven. Is it possible that they could be that they're at odds with one another? Is there any way to find a balance anywhere?
Yes, no, that's very good. Yeah, and it reminds me of what Kate said too about buy-in, right? So you think of a more managerial type style of leadership, and it is very much checks and balances, policy driven, results driven. And when you think of leadership, it's visionary, it's shared, and I think you can have both by creating a situation where people understand why you're collecting data, for example. Explain why this information is important, and
Mhm.
and as a team together, what is our vision? What are our values and principles to get us to that vision? And then what data do we need to collect to hold us accountable for that vision, those principles, and those values? So I think they can go together. But again, I think it's that buy-in and having that shared style of leadership to get everybody going in the same direction. So
So, Dr. Beth, which one would be the driver? in this situation? Would it be the policies or the principles? What would be the driver in this situation?
It should be the principles, right? Like your first thing you should do is your vision and setting up your values and principles that are going to drive the vision, right? And then behind that is, how do we get to these principles, these values in this vision? But you know, it is hard, because I think in some organizations we've gone so far. You even think of, you know, I have my background's Christian and church. You know, you even think of like a legalism mentality of having to have everything perfect and everything right. But I think what you want to do is you want to have a target, you want to have a goal, with the idea that perfection isn't attainable, but on the way to perfection is excellence. And when you get everybody, you know, behind that cause, I think. But again, yes, to answer your question, yes, principles are first, but you do often need checks and balances to make sure you're living by your standards, right?
Right, right.
Yes.
Wow, thank you so much for throwing those nuggets of wisdom out there. Coach Kate, I'm wondering, is it possible to step into an environment and be able to tell that this environment is driven by principles or is driven by rules? Is it possible to step in an organization? You work with organizations. Are you able to step into one and know that, okay, this is how the role here, or this is how the role here? Are you able to see that? And what are some of the 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 signs that you see to help you make that differentiation?
Okay, so when I step into an environment, I think the first is to speak with the people there, because when you walk into an environment, if you don't have any interaction with the people there, you won't know their values or their vision. Yes, sometimes most organizations, they put this on the wall, but what is on the wall does not always match what is on ground. So you need to have that conversation with people to find out, okay, what is going on in here. A lot is happening underneath the surface and we don't get to see it. So you need to have that interaction with the people there, speak with them and find out what's going on here. And not to, because sometimes this is what we see, this is what they tell us, this is what we're told. No, I do not go by what I'm told. I speak with the people first, try to connect with them to find out what is truly going on in here and how can I add value? How can I be of value to the people in this organization at this time? So that helps.
And what would you say is the advantage of introducing a principle centered culture in like a work environment? What would you say would be the advantages to be able to do that?
The first thing is it will reduce contention within the organization, because there's all contention between teams in organizations. It's mostly unspoken.
So, Coach Kate was telling us there that when you get into an organization, you want to know how they roll. You want to speak with the people on the ground, touch base with them, ask them what's happening around here. And she also told us that it helps to build principle centered cultures because it reduces contentions. Because, hey, most times it's unspoken, it's just there. Everybody knows it's there and nobody's saying anything about it. But people don't like it, but they are not talking about it. Dr. Beth, like, what do you think could be the steps to creating principle centered cultures, workplaces, homes, and just relationships? What could be some of those steps?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think it depends too whether or not you're going into a culture where you're starting fresh, right? And you get to kind of kick off that vision and those values, or if you're stepping into what she kind of was describing as an area of contention, and
Mhm.
where there might even be some hostility towards leadership and the way things are done.
Mhm.
But I think the first step is she was doing a great job talking about how you want to talk to the teams, right?
Right,
Like
right.
what did they feel is happening like on the ground?
Mm,
Um, do they know the vision and believe in the vision?
mm.
Were they part of determining the values of an organization and the missions and those
Interaction with the people that you wouldn't know their values or their
Right, right, Beth. You were talking about.
interaction.
Okay, are we good? Are we good? All right. So, Dr. Beth, you were talking about the importance of determining whether the team members were part of creating
yes.
the environment. Please go on.
Yes, yes, and so I think, communicating with them, surveying them, asking them questions, about their leadership, the senior leadership, if there's different layers of leadership, and if they see, okay, these were the values we agreed on. Do you feel they are happening? Do you feel these principles are happening? Why or why not? And then I think there's excellent leadership strategies that set up for principled centered leadership, like open communication, two-way
Oh,
communication, having relationships that people can come to you and tell you when they feel like you're going off course,
hmm.
and you're doing something that may not be true to the vision of the organization. And so I think open communication is the biggest, I think, the primary thing for having principle centered leadership that everybody believes in and is bought into.
Mm, mm, mm.
Yeah.
Wow, wow. From
Yeah,
what?
and
Yes, yes, please.
And yeah, that's so true, Beth. And I was just thinking as Beth was talking, it takes humility, humility within the organization, especially for the leaders, the top leaders. They need to be humble to accept, all these changes, all these suggestions, and views from others, other team members, subordinates, especially in organizations. Yeah.
Right, right. So while you're saying all of this, I'm thinking, what if a leader decides, well, I don't see the benefit in this whole principle centered leadership thing. Um, what might you say, Dr. Beth, to maybe tell them, yeah, it's something you have to look into. Maybe what would you say? Maybe you have younger leader that's you see the way they're leading, and you're like, oh, maybe they need some principled centered leadership in their leadership style, but they are not seeing it. What would you do? How can you advise them? What are some of the disadvantages if they choose not to get the buy-in into that type of leadership anyway?
Oh goodness. Wow. Honestly, I believe so strongly in needing that principle centered leadership that if I was working with a leader in our organization that didn't believe in it, I'm honestly not sure they'd be the right fit. Right. So, but it's so critical to, being a leader that people can count on, that I don't know. I honestly don't know how you could function as a leader and not, and maybe you don't know the language behind principle centered leadership, so perhaps that's what I'd want to know. Is it maybe they just don't understand it, and it's our communications off, and they don't understand what I'm saying when I say principle centered leadership. But if it's a leader that isn't principle centered, I'm not sure you're called to be a leader, right? I feel like I believe it so much that you have to be centered on principles to lead. That I mean the mentoring I would do there is, do you understand what that means? And if you don't, perhaps this isn't a calling for you, right? So perhaps this isn't something you want to do. But yeah, in my mind, I just don't understand how someone couldn't get on board with being principled. So
Mhm.
When we started the conversation, Coach Kate, you said something about the differentiation between what principles are and what values are. And we've also been trying to touch on how do these work with rules, because um, if, for instance, a leader is not seeing the essence in principle leadership, could it be that they don't just understand, like Dr. Beth is saying? Or how could we help in such a situation? What could we help them to realize so that they can have that buy-in, Coach K?
Okay, I think what Dr. Beth said is really important. I think probably they don't understand the language. They're not interpreting it the right way. And most often people we use values and principles interchangeably, but there is a difference when we look at it critically. And when leaders are made to understand that, look, it's not just about values. Values are internal, and values are they are a bit broader and more individualistic, but principles are more
Subjective,
general,
right?
and they are, yeah, values are subjective,
Mm,
but principles are objective. These are things that we can all agree on.
okay.
Agree on this, on principles. You cannot not agree on principles because it's been proven and tested. You can say, let's say, the principle of cause and effect, right? That's a principle. You can't, when you say to every cause there is an effect, it's something that happens. You can't dispute that. We all
Mm,
agree on that. And so when these leaders are made to see that principles are things that we all agree on, and it's something we can actually base our culture upon, their organizational culture, it's going to be more stable. The organizations are going to be more stable, and they will have kind of like a center. You can center everything on principle, and everything moves from that center. And
mm.
that's going to make your organization really stronger, and your people will be more inspired, more motivated to work because everybody can agree on principles.
Mm. So when you talk about principles, can you give us examples of principles? Because we know those of us on this platform that, hey, we live by them because they have been tested over time, and
Mhm.
it's either we live by them or we don't. And if we choose not to, somebody got to go. It's not the principles that will go, it's us that will go.
Right.
So
Yeah,
what are the examples of principles, so it can drive home to our listeners?
right. So let me give some that people can it's relate to right now. It's really everywhere. Diversity. Diversity is something we cannot argue about. We are all different, and when we ignore our differences, our individuality, then there are issues. There are always contentions within organizations when they do not recognize that they have diversity in their workforce. People are different. So we can't argue on that. That's it. That's the difference. Okay, another thing, like another difference. Let's say when we understand diversity, then we can talk about equity, we can talk about inclusion, right? But diversity is its principle. We're different.
And how can we use those differences to build us and not divide us? Dr. Beth, we are looking at principles and we are trying to bring examples so we can drive it home to our listeners, so they can have that buy-in as well, to build more principle centered cultures, wherever they find themselves, at their workplaces, where they are leading teams. Do you have any examples you can help us with?
Yeah, no, that was a great one though. I'm like taking notes on some of what you all are sharing, so thank you. But I would respect, right? And respect can also be a value set where it gets complicated. So, but the open communication, allowing people to be who they are in their communication
Mm,
to others is a way to show respect.
mhm.
And so, I think of disciplined, right? Like, yeah, that's how we get away from some of the rule based, like people have to show up to work on time.
Mm,
That's rule based. But if we're faithful in the value that produces discipline
mhm.
and the principle, then we agree for one another and respect for one another. that look, we show up on time and ready to work, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how it all works together. All these different adjectives can, all mean the same thing. And I think when you asked earlier about how to talk to someone that doesn't agree, they might be a rule, you have to be on time type of leader. But when you help them understand, no, that's about respect. That's about respect for your colleagues. That's about communicating the importance of that. That's about faithfulness that produces discipline, which is a principle. So, yeah.
I also realize that in leadership, the one principle that is timeless is it's about the people.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's about
Yes.
it's about the people.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's either we get it, or like Beth said, she doesn't see how we can lead if we don't get it. Why? Because those are like foundational principles that we need for certain roles in the community, certain roles in the society. It's about the people. And if we don't get it, that it's about the people, then we're going to struggle with enforcing rules and struggling to get the people to buy in, struggling to get, because we have not made it about the people. So that's one principle of leadership that I think that is fundamental while we have this conversation. I was also thinking that um, sometimes we are able to learn from the things that we go through. So I was wanting to ask you, Dr. Beth, have you ever had a situation that pushed you to maybe show by example some of the things that we are talking here? What was the difficult situation in your leadership journey, and how did you handle it, and what did you learn from it? Right?
Oh goodness, all the time. I think as leaders, I honestly believe we're tested more, right? I think because of our impact is tested, right? And so there isn't a safe place, because you've heard people talk about, well, if you're doing well, you're going to struggle with pride. Well, I've seen me not doing well, and I've struggled with insecurity. I've seen things going pretty good and I struggle with complacency, right? Like, so I've done pride, I've done complacency, I've done insecurity. It's kind of like, which story do I pick, But I always think of my very first one. I'll never forget, when I was 24, I was a principal, and I was probably struggling with pride, right? And I remember speaking to a teacher who I thought could be doing better, and this gentleman telling me, "I've been teaching longer than you are age, like." I've been teaching longer than how old you are. And I remember going home crying to my mom, who's one of my mentors, probably the biggest mentor, right? I remember going home crying to her and saying, I shouldn't be a principal yet. Like, I'm not ready. I'm 24. I shouldn't be doing this. I had no business being a principal. And she said, and I said, I'll never forget. I said, I should have stayed a teacher. And she listened patiently. And then I'll never forget. She said to me, she's like, Beth, you are a teacher. And those teachers are your students. You will never stop being a teacher. And that was a light bulb moment, of like a principled moment for me, that the calling and gifting that I believe that I was placed in my life was teaching. I teach them. I teach my people. And it was a light, and I just instantly changed the way I did everything. I mean, when you're a teacher, you don't go and tell your classroom this is how you have to do it or get out, or you're not too prideful. You give examples. You give them what a perfect one looks like. You give grace, because they're students. I taught students with special needs. I gave them lots of grace. And so the same thing was necessary for me as a leader. So that was probably the biggest like turning point, where I think I drastically heard a change in how I needed to lead. But goodness, Susan, I could give you so many
And
examples.
how did that affect your leadership? Like, how was your comeback as far as leading in that same environment, maybe with that same teacher who has taught for longer than your age?
Yes.
So how was your comeback being able to handle that environment?
Yeah, I came in and I showed humility. I came back even after that next day, after talking to my mom. I'm like, look, I've not been leading well, and I'm a teacher at heart. So let's talk about the things that aren't going well in your classroom and that you have told me aren't going well in your classroom. And let's look together and learn together. A big part of being a teacher type leader is forming professional learning communities where I don't come in and say, we need to fix this. As a team, we look at the problem together that we've identified together. As a team, we identified that this was an issue. And then we as a team come up with something we want to try to fix it. And so it's a learning organization instead of this top down, you have to do things my way or else. And so, yeah, it was really, and just showing that humility and being honest with people. Like, look, I didn't lead well through this. I had some of those situations through COVID where I had to look at my team and like, look, I look back and I could have done things better, but gosh, none of us have dealt with a pandemic in education.
Right.
And so let's talk about that. Let's be transparent about what you think I should have done better, and that I should be doing now. We shouldn't. And I think the neat thing too, Susan, is when we show our teams we can reset, it also communicates to them, oh gosh, if she can reset, I can reset. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much, but I hope that answered
Yes,
it.
I like you're talking too much. I really do. Because
That's good.
Yeah.
because while you're talking, I'm just feeling your heart in the your leadership style and how it could really be something we can all learn from, that level of vulnerability, coming from that place of we are in this together, we can learn together, we can grow together, not top down, because for how long is it going to work? It might work for just a short while until
Right.
the people tell you, okay, it's enough. Okay.
Well, I'll tell
We've
you
had
that first year as principal, I lost a lot of people. I wasn't good.
wow,
So,
wow,
I mean,
wow.
you have to reset if you want to do well, right? And it's
Mhm.
like what you said, Susan, I was missing. It was about my people. It was about my current students being my teachers. I missed it. It wasn't about my position. It wasn't about
Mm,
what I could wield. It was
mhm.
about the people and teaching to learning together. So
Right. Wow, wow, wow. Coach K, do you want to chime in? Tell us about, handling those difficult situations and just rerouting ourselves and resetting and coming back to those principles and asking yourself, okay, all right, am I going to go by the rules here and let them know I am the boss? Or am I going to let principle drive me right now and let them know there is another way to do this? Can you share with us an example of a situation and how you handled it?
Yeah, definitely. I remember in the early days of my organization, I I didn't delegate a lot. We would just share this. This is the vision. This is where we are going. Okay, this is what you have to do, and this is what I have to do, and we just keep going. And I do my bit, you do your bit, and then we come back and we get the results. But it didn't work that way. I realized that I had to keep sharing the vision,
Mm-hmm.
and there's so much that I cannot do on my own, because in the early days I kind of did, I felt this was my responsibility. I need to build this thing, and these people, they're supporting me, so let them just do what they can do and I can do what I can do. And since I know what I want, I can see the picture better than they can, so I'm just going to go ahead and do what I need to do. I realized that I was leaving my people behind a lot. I wasn't really taking them along with me. So, and that affected the results we were getting, and it started telling on my health as well. So, the eye opener came for me during COVID, when, okay, now we're working remotely and there is so much to do, but I cannot see everybody. I don't know what they're doing, but think everybody knows what they can do. So no results for the first few months of COVID, nothing. Then I had to come back and let's see what we're doing here, and what are you doing? What is the vision? Where are we really going? So we came back, we drew the board together, and we determined this is what we need to do. I learned to delegate during COVID. because I did not get COVID, but I had the COVID 2020 was the first time I really got burnt out because I was doing a whole lot by myself until I broke down and my people came. They said, look, we can do this. We can do this. And they took charge. My team took charge. I remember my major conference that I do annually, Live to Lead. I thought it was just going to be a big mess that year because I wasn't involved. But to my amazement, I saw the potential in my people, the people I was working with during that time. And I realized that I need them more, and I needed to show them that, look, I need you more than you need, more than I need you. So that's when I started showing up as really vulnerable, and that has helped me up till now. They take charge a whole lot more, and I have been able to delegate more than I could ever imagine. And it didn't have to be, it's not stressful. Delegating is not as stressful as I thought because they get it, they understand the vision, and they are willing to contribute. They have strengths that they tell me, I can do this, and they do it, amaze me. So that was it for me, learning to trust my people, learning to trust that we have different skills, and learning to trust that, look, I can't do everything, but I have people who can do a whole lot with me.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I know we had some technical hitches at the beginning, but I'm still going to be respectful of your time, so we don't go overboard too long. We have been talking principle-centered leadership. If you're watching us, and you're still on there, would like you to just put in the chat, put in the chat for us, principle centered, principle centered, principle centered, or you can just put centered, hashtag centered, because we are looking at how we can develop ourselves into those types of leaders that are more effective in our leadership, in our work, by driving our teams, driving our organizations, driving what we do by principles. Does this mean we don't need policies? I think Beth told us something very, very important. She said it's for us to be able to find that balance and to know where we have to insist on those policies, but then also understanding that the foundation of it all is the principles. And we also learned that for us to be able to get principle-centered teams and organizations, we need to have the buy-in from the people we are working with. Because hey, if they don't buy in, then what are we doing? John Maxwell says, if you're leading and nobody is following, you're just taking a walk. Like, hey, come down your high horse. You're there all by yourself. Come down, come meet the people where they are, so you can go along with them. What else did I learn? That if we don't work to have principle-centered organizations, we might be having people thriving in unspoken contentions without us even understanding it, because the open way is communication. Communication drives this type of environment. We learned that from Beth. Beth, what do you think about this whole conversation? Are we doing good?
Yeah, this is great. You're doing wonderful. And I loved what Kate was saying about delegating. And that's always so hard at the beginning, but when you get to start seeing the dividends of it and you see your own people grow, become leaders themselves. But the beginning of delegating is always so scary, you know. But yeah, I appreciated what you shared on all that. This is great, Susan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have heard other leadership experts say that if someone is able to do it 80%, some have even brought it down to 70%, let them do it.
Yeah.
Let them do it. If they can do it 70%, 80%, let them do it, because that's the only way that they can learn and grow with you. That's as far as delegation. So we are drawing close to our program for today, and we are looking at encouraging our viewers to transition if they are not already there, or if they are there already, to thrive more on principle centered leadership? I'm coming back to you, Coach Kate, to tell us more about this principle centered leadership and why we should all strive to have more of this in our organizations, in our teams, in the groups. Some of us work with volunteer groups. How
Mhm.
can we thrive more in principle centered leadership?
Right. I think we've said it before. I'm just going to say it again. Communication. We have to communicate as leaders and really be humble. We need to be humble and to let people see us for who we are, be vulnerable, because principles are something we can all agree on, but we need to communicate them. It's not just people will not see it if you don't show them. And as leaders, we need to show them and show them that this is where we stand, and this is the foundation of our organization, and we can all move from here because we can all see it. It's not something that is subjective. This is objective. We can all see it. Let's communicate it as leaders and understand that our people matter, and when they get it, their organization gets it. So it's not just about us, the leaders, getting it, but our people need to get it for their organizations to thrive. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Coach Kate. And I'm coming back to you, Dr. Beth Ackerman. Um, your take on this?
Yeah, again, some of what we've said, I think something we haven't really talked about is also surrounding ourselves by people who do it too, right? Who are principled leaders,
Mhm.
people who aren't necessarily just wanting to say yes, 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 yes all the time to everything we say, but people who are brave, right? That they'll ask the hard questions. They know things we don't know, right? You surround yourself with the experts, and I think when you do that and you surround yourself, quite frankly, with people better than you, other people see that, right? And they take note and they're like, oh gosh, wow. I mean, I call my team the dream team. Like they're the dream team. Everybody brings this
Just
amazing
right.
thing to the table.
Thank you
And I
so
think
much,
that
Coach Kate.
models
And I'm
principal
coming back
leadership.
to you, Dr. Beth Ackerman.
I'm sorry.
Your take? Okay. Okay. Uh, Go ahead, Dr. Beth. You were talking about surrounding ourselves with people who can do it too, surrounding ourselves with people who are principle centered, and even encouraging our people to be brave, the people who work with us to be brave and to ask those hard questions. It takes a level of humility and vulnerability to do that.
Yes, yes. And actually, I think one of our listeners best describes it. She says modeling is a great teaching tool. So I think by doing that, we're modeling those principal skills. When people see our humility, when people see our communication style, when people see us responding to constructive change, right? Constructive criticism, willing to learn and grow. So
Mm, mm. And also, you talked about surrounding ourselves with people who do it and people who even know better than us,
yeah,
and people who are able to help us grow as leaders as well.
right.
And we are drawing our curtains on this episode of the leaders world, and that was on principle centered leadership. There are many people who have come to listen just because they saw Dr. Beth Ackerman, and many have come just because they saw Coach Kate here with us. I don't know if Coach Kate is able to speak at this time because it looks like she's frozen.
I don't know. Can you hear me? I
Yes, we
look
can hear
frozen, but
you.
okay.
We can hear you go. You look frozen on the screen, but yes, we can
Yeah, I'm
hear
looking
you.
frozen
Um,
on the screen, but
yeah,
yeah.
your last words to our listeners, our viewers, please.
Well, my last words, it's a process, principle centered leadership, and leadership in general is a process. And there is no one person that gets it. And we need to just understand that we're in the process. And as leaders, we need to keep learning and learn from everyone around us, from our people especially, because they're always teaching us. I love what Beth said, that her students are her teachers. So they're always teaching us. Our people are teaching us, but we need to, as leaders, be alert and to listen to them and understand them. And also, sharing who we are is so important, because that is the only way they can really connect with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For if you look in the chat, I just put the link to Coach Kate's book, The Growing Life, and you can also find it on Amazon. You can find Coach Kate's book on Amazon, and also if you click the link I just put in the chat, you're going to see you'll be able to gain access to The Growing Life, which is her book, and also you can connect with them on LinkedIn and other platforms. They are always very willing to help in every way that they can. And our last words would be from Dr. Beth Ackerman for today.
Oh gosh, I don't know why I get the last word, but Susan, it's funny. One thing we didn't talk about that is just I think contagious as leaders is what I think of with you, and it's joy. It's just joy and happiness, and I think when we have that and we possess that, people want to, as you said, Maxwell, they want to follow, so that we're not on a walk alone. So I appreciate your joy, and I hope as leaders that value of joy is something that they also make part of who they are as principled leaders.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the close of our conversation for today. That was Coach Kate and Dr. Beth Ackerman joining us on Principle-Centered Leadership, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
For your corporate and personal needs.
Leaders World Institute, changing lives, one leader